So every time you have a transition, so new semester, new school, anxiety is super common. So first and foremost, those feelings that you're feeling, any increase in worry, any sort of physical feelings of anxiety, like your stomach hurts, your heart's racing, those are really normal because you're worried about the anticipation of what's to come. And anxiety is really sort of the worry about the future, what's going to happen in the future, and any sort of uncertainty just contributes to that. So all of those feelings that you might be thinking, you might be actually feeling physically, it might be affecting your sleep, would be symptoms you'd notice in anxiety. It's a really good question to know, how do I know if what I'm experiencing is a problem? Because I just told you feeling worried, feeling stressed, feeling concerned about any of the uncertainty is super common, and you shouldn't beat yourself up about that. So how do you know if it's actually a problem? Really depends on how severe your symptoms are and how much they're impacting your life. So you might feel worried, but be able to do everything. But you might feel so worried that you can't see friends, you can't go to class, you can't interact in the way you used to. That's really disrupting your day-to-day life. And that would be something to be concerned about. If the symptoms seem to be getting worse, like you were sleeping most nights and now you only sleep some nights, that's also something to be concerned about. Or if you're a person who already is seeing somebody for anxiety and you're starting to notice some of those warning signs that got you going to therapy or to a psychiatrist in the first place, that would be a sign to go earlier. So you might actually go earlier than someone else because you've already had experience with this, and you might notice your warning signs earlier. And the sooner you get connected, the better for sort of preventing anything worse from happening than needs to happen. So all of my college kids tell me that basically they're fine if their grades are fine. So the first thing I would say is, remember there are other spheres of your life. So grades we can do sometimes sort of on like robot automation. So we're really good at school. We can keep doing school. But if I ask you how your sleep was, if I ask you if you socialize, you'll tell me you haven't left your room for weeks. So it's really important that you pay attention to those other spheres of your life, because those are things that are going to go first, but you're also going to let them go first because you're more concerned about school. So when we talk about strategies to managing stress, you want to make sure that you have a social life. It doesn't mean that you have a million friends, because people get really worked up that when we say that you have to have a million friends, but it means you have someone you can turn to, that you can talk to about what's going on, that you can be vulnerable with, that you can get distracted with and go do something you like to do. That's really important. Outside of people, having something you like to do that you keep in your life is also important. So whether that's a hobby or that's a coping skill, whatever you do is helpful. So we often frame coping skills like, these are the ones that work and everyone should do them. I don't think it's very helpful to do that. I think it's much more helpful to say, what will you do and what helps you, and do those things. So whether that's exercise because you like exercise, that can become social if you do an exercise class. Whether that's mindfulness or meditation, you could go learn how to do those skills, or you could listen to an app. Whether that's watching stupid television and relaxing, which is one of my favorites, that's also okay. Like, what you choose to do should be what works for you. I think a big other thing that you could work on is boundaries. I think we're all bad at boundaries. It's not something that just college students struggle with. I struggle with. I think if I learned it better in college, maybe I'd struggle less with it now. But really, like, feeling comfortable saying no. And when you think about things you're asked to do, going, do I actually have the emotional capacity for that? So sometimes we have the physical capacity for it. Sometimes we have space in our schedule for it, but that doesn't mean we should do it. So when you're looking at your to-do list, it's not just like these big, horrible, long things you have to do. Like, you need to read all of the chapters for one class. You should look at it at smaller tasks, like read this many pages, and try to get them into these sort of like bite-sized tasks that might make your list longer, but you'll be able to cross stuff off. So you'll say, I did something and I'm being effective. And that's really important, just as much as it is important to be able to say no to things and not adding more to your list. One of the things I think people forget about college is you're around people all the time. And it wasn't usually the case for people. So like, you would go home and maybe you don't have siblings, or maybe it's just one parent, or maybe it's just a caregiver, and maybe you're just with yourself most of the time. In college, it's often set up where you're in housing. You might have a roommate. You might share a bathroom. You might go to these like big classes, and your classes might have been small when you were younger. And so I think we just kind of take for granted how much peopling, for lack of a better word, that there is in college. And so give yourself some grace for that, and know that you might need to slowly expose yourself to it and not just be like flooded with people all the time. So try to still preserve some time for yourself where it makes sense. Try to do smaller social activities where you can. You'll be able to see if like a club is smaller or a class might be smaller. And so you're not just in these big groups all the time, because that might help. Again, making sure that you have a person you can talk to and not just a million people you can talk to can be helpful for that. Being sure you sort of check the thoughts that you're having can be helpful too. So I think when we're comparing ourselves to other people, we're not very nice to ourselves. We tend to say things like, you're stupid. Nobody wants to hang out with you. Why would it be your friend? Nobody wants to be your friend. We're just not nice to ourselves. So trying to catch the times where you're doing that and correcting it and saying like, how would you tell a friend that? So if a friend came to you and a friend said, I'm really struggling with socializing in college, you wouldn't be like, well, that's because you're a horrible person, or that's because you're really bad at being a friend, because that just sounds ridiculous. But it's the things that we say to ourselves. So being able to reframe what you say to yourself like you're talking to a friend can be really helpful, and say, it's really hard adjusting to college. It's not a surprise that you might feel like that. How do we make it feel better for you? Or how can I make sure that there's some time in your schedule where you can read by yourself and not be around people all the time? And I think that that's really important. So we call that self-compassion. You can look some of that up too for other ideas, but that's really what that means. Being nicer to yourself can be really helpful in those situations, because you're already really worried about what everyone else thinks, and you sort of internalize that and make it even meaner towards yourself. So my argument for this will again be that it's sort of person specific. So how you prepare yourself for an activity might be what actually helps you kind of bring down your anxiety and calm down. So maybe that's you watch a television show before you go. Maybe that's you listen to music. Maybe that's you do a meditation. Whatever that is, you can kind of make it a ritual where you train yourself like, I feel better now, I can go. And I think that's really important. Sometimes journaling can be helpful for that too, because you're kind of alone with your thoughts, and you can just kind of word vomit on a piece of paper and feel like you get it all out before you're around other people. And that can be really nice. I also think it can be helpful for some people to think about what conversations they might have, what the interactions might be like, and kind of, I don't know, simulate what that could be like for themselves. You might have to write it out. You might have to talk to a friend or a therapist about something like that. But what scares you about those conversations? What are you worried about that you might say? How do you get out of those conversations? So if you want to leave, what does that feel like? Are you capable, and do you feel okay saying, I'm just going to leave? Or do you need to practice what it might be like to tell someone you're going to leave, or to just leave? And so kind of walking yourself through that mentally, knowing how to leave, where you would leave, how to have those conversations can be really helpful. And sometimes that's actually scripting it if you don't feel comfortable kind of going in blind, and that can lower your anxiety, because you're saying, oh, I'm prepared for this, and I've thought about this, and I know how I'm going to deal with this. And that kind of decreases the uncertainty of it and the anxiety of those interactions. Yeah, so when we kind of talked about the difference between like my anxiety just being like, I'm a little bit worried about school, and my anxiety being like, oh no, I can't function because of that worry, that's a big difference, right? So when anxiety becomes something that you need help for it, it's interfering with your day-to-day life, not just school, all of your life, right? All of your life. It's getting worse. It's causing physical symptoms. It's preventing you from doing things you want to do. It's affecting your sleep, and you're just not able to get a handle on it, and it's really bothering you. Or, it's leading you to like not want to go to class or not want to do activities. All of those things would be warning signs, because again, it's interfering with your life, or it's becoming more severe. I think there's really no wrong time to ask for help for something like therapy or something like school challenges. And I hope that you ask earlier rather than waiting until it has impacted every aspect of your life. When you ask earlier, sometimes they can point you to learning resources, or sometimes they can just give you a therapist for a little bit, and you just needed to talk it out for a little bit of time. So the place to go is honestly usually the student counseling center on campus. They usually can point you to the right resources, but if it feels more school related, there's probably something like a learning center on campus or a place where people go, like it might be called a disability resource center, but it usually is like if you're struggling with school, a place you can go for that, and that can be really helpful. Whether you need medication is honestly a conversation about sort of how severe your symptoms are or your family history or your past history with medication. And so if you've been on meds before and they've helped, don't wait and go through these like sort of steps of like, I should see a therapist and then I should see the learning person, but you should go, I've been on meds before. I'm getting to the place that I might need meds again, and make an appointment with a psychiatrist. I think it's really important to do that, especially if you know they've worked for you before or they've worked for a parent or family member and you know that that could be an option for you that you're considering. The earlier you have that conversation, the better, but they might not put you on meds depending on the severity of your symptoms, because we're often deciding like, where does the balance lie and how can we help somebody, but also make sure they're getting the right stuff. But I will say that nobody should say to you, you're not sick enough to get care, you can't be here. They should say, tell me your story. How can I help? And then if they're not the right person, which sometimes I'm not as the psychiatrist on campus, their job should be to get you to the right person. So I hope that you feel like you can advocate for that to happen. And if somebody kind of says like, oh, I'm not giving you whatever you are in that office for, you say, I understand, but given what you heard about my story, can you help me get to the right place? Because there are a lot of resources on campus and I'm super confused in how to navigate them. And that's very fair, because when you're anxious, when you're not sleeping, when you're sad, it's very hard to navigate anything, let alone sort of a new place, a new campus, like all the resources that come with it. And you shouldn't be expected to. So the tips I would say are: one, deep breathing is really helpful. It can calm you down, but if you do it like for the very first time when you're stressed out, you're going to hate it. But there are different forms of it. Like you can use like an app called Breathe to Relax. You can use something called box breathing. The gist of it is you exhale longer than you inhale. We use it in like yoga and stuff like that too, right? It just kind of makes your nerves like calm down. And the cool thing about it, I think, is you can't see it. So people, if you're really stressed out and you need to breathe out longer than you breathe in, no one's going to go, I bet you just breathed out longer than you breathed in, unless they're being super weird. And that's like totally not your problem, right? So deep breathing can be really good for that because it's subtle. Another thing that can be really helpful is something we call progressive muscle relaxation, which is a big fancy word that just means that you're sort of like going muscle by muscle and flexing it and relaxing it until you're like kind of through your whole body. So it takes you out of your head and brings you like into your body, right? So you go like little tiny muscles in your hand to like full muscles in your arm. You can even do your face. You just kind of go through all of the things and kind of scrunch them up and let them down all the way through to your toes. That can be helpful just because it takes you out of your head and puts you into your body. If that feels too complex, sometimes things like stress balls can be really helpful for the same reason, because you're like focusing on the ball and squeezing the ball instead of whatever your brain is doing, right? Which is a ton of things, right? Usually your brain's just kind of going wherever it wants to go. And the third thing that I would say is sometimes it just helps to kind of like ground yourself in the things that you like. So sometimes there are different techniques of like how to get yourself out of your head and into the present. A good one is just literally like going through a list of things, like in your, like saying it out loud. Like, let's say you like cars, just naming brands of cars can be helpful. If you like stupid television shows, you can name a character on those TV shows and go through and just name them. And sometimes that's just like, it's really just focusing you on the list and the naming and away from all of the stress wherever your brain is taking you. And that can be really helpful too. So social media is our main source of news. It's also our main source of like what everyone else is doing and keeping up with the Joneses. Both of those things cause anxiety. And in college students, honestly, they cause anxiety in everyone. So the sort of news bit, I mean, our news does not tend to be super uplifting and hasn't for a long time. And the ones that get a lot of play and sort of get to the top of our feed are like really depressing videos for the most part, or really depressing headlines and stories. And so keeping in mind that when you're scrolling, it's not just like mindless scrolling. I think that we've gotten so used to, because it's so easy in our phone and whatever, just kind of like going and going and going and not realizing we have emotional reactions. So pay attention to your emotional reactions when you're scrolling. Pay attention to your physical ones. Are you grinding your teeth? That's a big one. I'll notice like I've been grinding my teeth for like 30 minutes and clearly I've been very angry about what I'm reading, but I don't go, hey, I'm grinding my teeth, I should pause, right? And so take a break can be really helpful. Plan in breaks if you need them. Don't use it right before bed can also be helpful. I think it's really important that like we have rituals where our phones aren't involved. So if you're going to go meet a friend and like you're going to be hanging out at their place, maybe the phone is in a different room, just so that we're having some distance from that mood and those experiences can be really helpful. I'm not a person who will ever tell you like social media is the devil, because here I am on social media and things talking about this stuff, but I also use my own social media. But I do think it's a balance, and we have to be mindful about the fact that it can affect our mental health and we might need to shut it down sometimes and we might need a break sometimes. Well, also, if you catch yourself looking at other people's stuff and going, they're better than me, I'm not doing as well as them, like look at how pretty they are and I'm not, those are also thoughts that might lead you to take a break. So not just am I grinding my teeth, are these news stories making me angry, but am I like really having a hard time digesting the things about other people and it's making me feel bad about myself? That'd be another reason to sort of say, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to put my phone away. I don't need it. And keep in mind that people used to watch the news for like 30 minutes a day and they were totally fine. And we just have this appearance that we need to be connected and aware at all times. And it's not fair. Like we really should be allowed to take breaks and not be scrolling every day. And we should be able to say to ourselves, like, it's just not great for me right now. And it isn't a problem when we do. And so know that as a college student, who often people tend to be pretty strongly big advocates for things and care about the world and care about others a lot in college, especially, you're not a bad person if you need to put your phone away sometimes. It's okay. Being in college is really hard and you're allowed to have feelings about it, but know that those feelings are valid. Sit with them, be with them, don't discount them, but know that transitions are hard. College is hard. I thought college was hard, which is why I work with college students, because I want you to know I see you, I've been there, and I want to help. And so whatever you're feeling is valid. Let yourself have those feelings. And at the same time, if you need help, don't feel ashamed or guilty or like something's wrong with you. If you need help, ask for help, and ask for help early. The later you wait, the harder it's going to be, and it's going to have already impacted your life a lot more. And if you pay attention earlier, notice changes earlier, you'll be able to get help earlier. And that is a really strong thing to do. It's a really hard thing to do, but it's a very important one to learn and get used to. And if you're going to learn it sometime, college is a great time to do that.